You know, the original set of documents that I found was put together by a secret Pentagon task force, and those documents just put a hook in me. And from there, I didn't even know what the story, eventual story that I wanted to tell was, but when I found those documents, I wanted to tell the story that the documents told me, that, and basically that was that U.S. war crimes in Vietnam weren't isolated incidents. It wasn't just My Lai. If you read the 30,000 books in the literature on the war, Vietnamese civilian suffering is basically condensed down to a couple paragraphs or a couple pages on the My Lai massacre. I mean, horrendous, 500 civilians killed over a period of 4 hours. But it's really been condensed to that in some ways. I found these documents that showed that there were atrocities committed by every major army unit that served in Vietnam. So I realized there was a different story there to tell. And I wrote my dissertation from these documents, a huge tome, 1,200 pages. It's a monster. And I really thought that I knew something about the war. And then I went to Vietnam for the first time, and I realized I didn't know a thing. And I realized there that there was a different story, a greater story that needed to be told. And it wasn't the story of U.S. atrocities. It was a story of Vietnamese civilian suffering. Because I would go into a village to talk to people, with a stack of documents in my hand, to talk about one specific spasm of violence, one massacre. And what the Vietnamese would tell me about was what it was like to live for 10 years under bombs and artillery shells and helicopter gunships, and how they had to negotiate every aspect of their lives around what they call the American War. And once they told me these stories, and I heard them in Hamlet after Hamlet after Hamlet, I realized, I finally got it through my thick skull that this was the real story of the war, that millions of people went through this. And I said, it's not an atrocity story, although atrocities from those documents punctuate the book. It's a larger story of the day-to-day of the war and what it's like to live with that sense of uncertainty, what it's like to have your home burned down 3, 4, 5 times, about being forced into a city slum or a refugee camp, and then finding that you can't make it work there. There's not enough food or water or shelter. There's no work. And you have to drift back into the war zone. That's your best bet. And and once I heard those stories from the Vietnamese, I realized that not only did I want to tell that story, I believed I had a duty to tell it, that I owed it to these people to try and inform the American public, because I thought that our books on the war, while they're fantastic books out there, that they were lacking in this aspect. And so, I mean, that sustained me through a decade-long process to stay with the project, even though there are ups and downs.